So do we have something from them with their?
You do.
Is Dennis, he does. What's that?
Do I need a chair?
If you retire after one.
I can take this chair home with me.
Not much, would you? You don't. Sherry will make note that it's read for the record.
It's great.
Yeah. All you do is motion will be made.
what it was. So I never said,
Right.
oh, good, so I'm gonna ignore the numbers.
Yeah, just, I
They were
moved
telling me
to
to do draft letter to be received, recommend.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
Sherry can read that.
Thank you, thank you.
I certainly know her. That was, it's a good job. There's some.
Cracky might be retiring. At it. I don't know where it is.
Sunny and I ended at 5:30.
Doing good? Family's, good. We're gonna be empty nest. Daughter, she's going to, Purdue. Yeah. Not that expensive. Did get their tuition way down.
Government.
Right.
Call the 7 p.m. public hearing to order. This is an application on behalf of Delamar, West Hartford LLC, seeking approval of an amendment to a special development district located at 1 Memorial Road, known as Delamar. The amendment requests changes to the approved architecture and landscaping to permit the elimination of an architectural rooftop, mechanical screen, the elimination of decorative trees, and the addition of a seasonal vestibule enclosure for the Artisan restaurant. Roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And we have Mr. Swanton sitting in for Mr. Williams.
Was dramatic. Okay. Thank you, Ms. LeBrun. And we have a presentation from the applicant. Hello, Ms. Pearson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council. Please. My name is Robin Pearson. I'm an attorney with the firm of Alter and Pearson in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Pleased to be here this evening on behalf of the applicant. I'm going to just sit down and ask that Mr. Valerio Zambrano, who is the Vice President of New Business Development for Greenwich Hospitality, otherwise known as the Delamar folks, is going to go through the elements of the application before you this evening. He does have visuals, and for that reason, we've brought the screen down, which I think would make it more interesting for our audience also. So Mr. Zambrano will go through the application, and I'd like to have the chance to say a few words at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. Before we get into the application, I wanted to say a few words about how excited and happy we are to be here in West Hartford. We're pretty new, but it's been really a great pleasure to be here. And we've seen quite good feedback already from the community. And we're really looking forward to what the next years will bring. We've hired more than 150 people so far, between full-time employees, consultants, contractors, part-time. We've served, we've provided events to a number of corporations, local corporations, non-profit. I just got a list of over 77 non-for-profit that we hosted or sponsored, and we're really excited to be here. So I wanted to start with that. In this amendment, we are asking three changes to the current plans. The first one relates to 4 lindens for trees that were supposed to be placed on the Raymond side. And they weren't placed just because the trees that were planted were so large that we wouldn't need to have any extras. It just wouldn't fit. So we achieved the same goal with bigger trees rather than smaller and more trees. And we presented our request to DRAC, who was comfortable with our and the zoning office, and they were comfortable with our request. The next amendment, we're requesting to add a vestibule to the entrance of the restaurant, and the reason for that is simply to really help with in the winter months with providing more comfort to the people sitting next to the door. We've worked with DRAC as well, and they are comfortable with our recommendation. I want to show you what it's the design intent, and we will be working with the building department to make sure that obviously they're comfortable with the structural elements of it. And here is the, let me zoom in a little bit. And this is what it's going to look like right at the entrance of the restaurant. This will be seasonal, only when it's probably depending on the season, but between, I would say, December and March, and it will be removed in April as the weather gets nicer and warmer. The third element that we would like to request an amendment for is the a screen around the cooling tower on top of the building. Our request is to not install a screen, which we try to design several versions of it, and these are real pictures, by the way, and right now the tower without a screen looks this way, and it is difficult to see because we're far, but there is some visual clutter on the east side related to mechanical elements that are attached to the tower, and a screen would obviously block that view. We tried to engineer various versions of a screen, but in all our attempts, we couldn't get the screen to be any smaller than what we are presenting here. We work with our engineer, with our architect, and the reason why the box is so large is because there needs to be ventilation within the cooling tower, and there needs to be access for maintenance, repairs, or emergencies. And we don't feel comfortable putting such a big structure on top of the building. We think that if we paint it, which we did, by the way, a few months ago, we think that if we paint it, the end result, would be better than putting such a big structure. As you can see already, the tower blends in with the roof line, making it less visible than it was a few months ago when it was shiny and of a metal color, bright metal. And if you look at it from almost every side, from every corner, you're familiar with this building, I suppose. The tower as it is, it's not that intrusive, but when you put a big screen, now you really make a more problem bigger from our perspective. And as we worked, the one side that obviously creates problems, and we acknowledge it, is the east side closer to Whole Foods. And that's where you really can see the mechanical elements that play a role there. And we have ladders and fasteners that really, and two mother fans that really make that appearance not as pleasant as we would love to. We work with DRAC to find other ways to screen. This seems to be the problem, and we work with DRAC to really focus on this side. The others, that didn't seem to be a problem, and we came up with a partial screen that could be helpful, but we still feel that here's a layout, but we still feel that the size and the volume is going to make, again, the problem bigger than it is. And what we really wanted to put forward as we work through DRAC is keep the tower the way it is, maintain that volume, which is already pretty large, and remove all the clutter that seems to be the cause of that visual clutter. So if we, as it currently stands, this is a close-up. Obviously, from the street, you only see the top, as you've noticed before, as you've seen from the other pictures. If you remove all the ladders and you look at the right side and all that extra mechanical equipment that's there, you're really only left with the two fans, and we can put a louver screen in front of it, which would blend those fans into the structure itself and make it less visible from the street. We tried to give you an example of what it would like from the street, but it's very difficult to see. But that makes my point. I mean, there isn't really. It's a far object and it's large, but the elements themselves. Once you remove the ladders and the fasteners, you're really only left with those two boxes. And we think that it's a much better solution than putting a big, large box, whether it's partial or full. And lastly, which is a consideration, not the main reason, but if putting a screen up there was a simple exercise, just attaching a screen to the tower, that we wouldn't have any issues, obviously. But it isn't. It needs to be farther away. It needs to be bigger. And because of that, we also need to build a pretty extensive support infrastructure that costs us $76,000 just to put that screen up top. And we feel that any cost-benefit analysis that you can really run by putting a small louver fan sheet in front of the fans for $5,000 versus a full screen, which makes it bigger for $76,000, I think it just doesn't. It's not worth the effort. Or we would rather put it into better elements for the hotel, for the town, than on a screen on the roof. And with that, I'll thank you for your time, and I'll.
Don't go away. If you could just use some of the visuals here, I'd like to just go through quickly in summary for the commission. First of all, you do have a letter in your package that's a late package item from Design Review Advisory Committee. We did meet with them this afternoon in the hope that it might be possible to get a favorable review of the painting plus cleaning up the clutter on the east side that faces Troutbrook, which is the side that was most problematic for the design for DRAC. And we were not successful. So the letter that you have says that DRAC supports the first two amendments to the application, and it is a recommendation. It's not a decisive review for your consideration, but I know how much we all rely on what DRAC has to say with regard to an application, and certainly no one wants to come before this board without the support of DRAC. However, DRAC does say that they cannot support the solution. Paint, removal of hardware, and addition of louvers on the fan openings is not compatible with the building's architectural elements at this important location and the applicant's past commitments on this design element. And with that, they're referring to the fact that when the cooling tower was originally approved, it was going to be on the ground. It migrated to the roof during the time that plans were really being finalized for building permits and build-out. And at that point, they were approved with a commitment to put up a full screen all the way around the equipment, which is not unusual for a design anyone brings to you that you look at through the special development district process. And the applicant had every intention of doing that. The cooling tower turned out to be larger than they originally thought it would need to be. The location where it ultimately was located on the roof makes screening a little more visible, not more difficult. Screening is difficult in any event because of the wind shear up at that location. And the reason the cost of screening, and that's why screening is so expensive up there. And I'm not sure that you heard, and certainly it's not something that you should normally perhaps consider as an element in your decisions with regard to aesthetics. But the cost for putting that screening up right now, for the full screening around that cooling tower, is $76,000. We had hoped by doing a partial screening that it might reduce the cost to make it feasible, and the applicant just received one bid for $74,000, which was $39,000 of which is the structural work that would have to be done to secure something. You can think about the wind up at that level, just taking this thing off the roof. $32,000 for the panels themselves, and there also needs to be crane rental for a day to be able to get everything up to the roof and do the work. Frankly, if it had been, as was said, if it had been $7,000 to put that screen up, they would do it. Even though I will tell you that the architect, and perhaps you remember Israel Smith, who was here when the whole Delamar project was originally approved, and testified at length on aesthetic issues before you, and I think it's fair to say designed an absolutely gorgeous hotel building. He was on the direct call today, and what he said was, look, it's not for me, for him, it's not the cost. For the applicant, it may be the cost, but for the architect, he felt very strongly that the massing of that box around the cooling tower was aesthetically much more deleterious for the design of the building than the proposal that they've got now to clean up the side from the views from Trout Brook. And I'd like, would you do me a favor and go back through the 4 views, the photographs today of each of the views of the building? And I'm sure you've had a chance to go out there and you know that when you're on the ground, you can't see it. You can't see that tower. You have to be quite a ways back to be able to see it. But again, to just go through the architect's point, let's do the existing first.
Yeah, this is the first as it is right now. It's a real picture.
Okay, so this is the existing view with that painted today, looking at it from the
Trout Brook.
Trout Brook, Trout Brook, okay. This is if you put the box around it. And there was concern that, wait a minute, that screening doesn't have to be that big, does it? And as Valerio testified, it does, because you have to have a distance from the cooling tower out to the screen. You have to be able to anchor it. You have to have space between it and the cooling tower for the ventilation, and also to be able to maintain the cooling tower. So this is the view from the police station today. That's a photograph. If you put up the screen, that's what it looks like. It's plain, but it's big. This is the view from Trout Brook today. And if you put the full screen around it, it's bigger, it's clean, but it's bigger. And was that it? Was it no more?
Yeah.
That's it. So go back, if you would, to
those.
our view. Yeah, that's right. Okay,
Yep,
so
yes.
again, this is the view if you were to
One second.
take, as the architect said, take the stuff that mucks it up now, the ventilation holes, the ladders, all the extraneous looking equipment on it, and instead clean it up and put those boxes over the ventilation ducts, that it becomes much less intrusive. So, as the architect said at the direct meeting, reasonable minds disagree. We're definitely, bless you, definitely sorry that it got to the point where we have to be even having this discussion now. These are things that, in a perfect world, would have been worked out before the building was built, and certainly right from the beginning, so there wouldn't have had to have been amendments during the process. But there have been. The applicant has, put a great deal of care into the aesthetic design of this building. It's at that point in time where it's got a new structure that, as he said, has been well received, is being well used, but it's not easy opening a hotel in today's economy, even in a town like West Hartford. And I argued with him that you should know what the economic repercussion is if they have to put that up there, as well as understanding what we believe to be a better aesthetic choice, not to box that out at that point. So if you look at the your standards of review, you know what, one other thing. There is a letter that was sent in May 16th, and I think since the architect is not here, that I should just read 4 sentences that he has in his May 16th letter that was sent to DRAC, in which he says, after many attempts, we identified a solution that achieves the goal in the simplest and most efficient manner, keeping the look clean and less voluminous than any other alternatives considered. Our recommended plan of action is to remove all non-essential equipment and accessories currently located on the east side of the cooling tower, leaving only the 2 fan motors, which will be screened with a louvered sheet metal wrapper. Currently, these fan motors appear at a distance as dark spots. Take it out to the distance, would you? Appear at a distance as dark spots on the larger unit because their shape creates a deep recess and shadow. By, quote, boxing them out, unquote, with a painted louver metal cover, they will present a more homogeneous picture. These modifications will leave the east facade of the unit free of visual clutter and nearly identical to the other facades. And then he submitted those with his letter to DRAC. I'm not sure if you have this because it went only to DRAC, so I would like to ask that it be put into the record. So with that, I guess the only other thought I have is, if you look around, and each of these special development district projects or development proposals is a specific proposal that stands on its own, and it has to be decided on its own merits. But certainly, if you look around in the area, in the vicinity of this particular rooftop, there are others. There are other, including right across the street at the police station, which I think I'll just send around to, which is no excuse. I mean, we understand that when you do a development within a special development design district, there are standards of excellence, and each application has to be decided on whether it meets the merits of the special development district. One of the standards in your review is whether what is being proposed that you have to decide, make a decision on, is compatible with existing development in the area. And I would like to just give you some adjacent rooftops. You can see that they all have visible mechanical equipment that's not screened. Some of these are special development districts. I don't believe Hampshire House was, but the others are special development districts. And I'll just send these along for your review. So for all those reasons, our architect does believe this is a better aesthetic solution than the screening. We're definitely sorry it had to get to this point. We're before you and don't have a supporting letter from DRAC. But we also believe, too, that the applicant has evidenced great consideration for design elements in the building of this hotel, and that the cost-benefit analysis just doesn't support requiring a business to have to make this expenditure at this stage to do something that we don't even feel is going to be visually beneficial. So with that, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I think they heard enough from
Okay.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Sweeney?
I just have a quick question. How is the Delamar Hotel doing?
It's it's doing well. We obviously wish it was doing better. We open in September, which is not the best time to open. You have a month and a half, and then winter months, and winter season is never really easy. But we pull through the really hard season, and now we need to see what the summer brings to us. And I think, as you know, the first year or second year of a luxury hotel is really critical. And that's why we're here before you.
And what's your occupancy rate right now?
It's about 60%. But again, it's not a it's not a good projection for the year. We went through winter months where we had 35-40%, and we have projected occupancy in the 60% range.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, not quite. Are you thanking her, not you? Just looking through the file, we had gotten with the email agenda last week. Is that it? There it is. Wait, just from. No, yeah. There was something from our building department. We got building comments that were sent. They were concerned about the
The vestibule.
vestibule.
Yes, those have been addressed. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, again, I don't have that letter in our packet. I don't see. If you could address the concerns that were raised at that time.
Yes, the building
the responses?
department wanted to make sure that the structure that we're building is sound and structural fit for the location, given the high wind and that are facing that side of the building. And we have spoken with the building department, and we have committed to the building department to work with them to make sure that whatever structure we put in place is going to be withstanding all weather conditions. And so the final approval from the building department obviously will be in line with the work that we'll be doing.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winograd. Anybody else? You have one? Yeah. Ms. Kerrigan? You have one? Sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's my understanding that you just said that the unit originally was on the ground level and it was moved to the roof. Can you just tell me why that happened?
I don't know the exact details. I was in detail. I don't know. I know that it was moved for various reasons, including the location beyond the roof is more accessible for the system, and it was a decision that was run past the all the approvals, and I know that it was discussed heavily at the time, and that unfortunately I wasn't around with the company at the time, and I don't know the exact details.
So the original screen was designed when the unit was on the ground?
Yes, I'm not even sure there was a screen at the time on the ground, but when it went up the roof, then obviously we were required to put a screen. The problem is that the original structure on the roof was smaller, therefore the screen wouldn't need to be this big, and maybe we wouldn't even need it based on how the size at the time. And then the engineer ended up amending the size to a bigger size to accommodate the hotel. I'm not quite sure how they miscalculated the usage or the requirements, but the screen became larger because the tower itself became larger. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, I don't have more details.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Burns?
Thank you. So just so I understand, the unit that was proposed to be on the ground was smaller than the unit that you actually ended up installing on the roof, correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay. And when the decision was made to put it up on the roof, do you know if that came before the council for approval? And I'm looking at Todd and he's shaking his head. And so we approved the move with the appropriate screening around it at that time? And were there pictures or drawings of what that would look like?
For the record, Todd DeMay, Town Planner. Yes, there were. That original movement, I can actually shed a little light on the other issue as well. When the mechanical unit was on the ground, it was on the back side of the building and screened by a fence and landscaping. There is some significant landscaping on the Troutbrook side. I believe one of the reasons it was moved was there was a decision they didn't want those mechanical units being right under their event space on the south lawn. There was some concern about sound and noise and view from the event space down on top of the mechanicals. So I think that was one of the reasons. When the mechanical unit was moved on the roof, as Mr. Zambrano said, it was a smaller unit, and the representation to the council was that it wouldn't be seen, it would be architecturally screened and not seen or visible, noticeable. So we had some renderings that showed the location in those statements with a louvered screen.
Okay. So what was proposed was visible or not visible?
Well, what was proposed, you would see some of the screen, but it wouldn't be as large as what was shown in the previous slides.
Okay, so there would have been screening, but it wasn't that huge box that we were looking at before?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Anybody else? Ms. Fay?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just quickly in these pictures, is the color that's proposed on the right-hand side, is that what it's going to be, or are you going to paint them lighter?
We use exactly the same paint color as the roof line. So maybe the shade here doesn't make justice, but it's exactly the same paint color as the roof.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just learning the protocol here. Secondly, it is a financial expense or burden that you've categorized it as. Could you let us know if the building was over budget or under budget, the final result?
It was over budget. And we're still finishing up the last payments as agreed with the contractor. And it's all under control, but we don't want anything to get it out of control, any unexpected expense.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So basically, we have here a situation that has presented itself after the construction of the building, which I just want to get this on the record. It's probably no different than a special development district situation where we had over at Quaker Green, over in Elmwood, where there were air conditioning condenser units that were supposed to go on the roof that ended up on the ground because of some architectural problems, and we were really upset as to how they were going to be screened. And so it's sort of like the reverse scenario here with respect to a mechanical unit. To say that I'm not bothered by the partial approval by DRAC would not be the truth, okay? Because those people are well-respected design experts who spend a lot of time working with applicants to try to provide us with recommendations that in their professional volunteer position best meets the needs of our community and what I consider to be pretty high standards. But I'm also a realist, and it's $76,000 to put a bigger box up there. And when you drive by, and I think your pictures illustrate, because I've driven by all 4 different angles there to look at this, you're not catching it very much. You're catching a glimpse, okay, of the mechanicals that are currently up there. So probably to the average person who doesn't read about this in the newspaper, they probably have no clue that there's something up there that we approve that ought not be looking the way it is. So I think we each have to make a decision as to whether or not what we approved originally and what the solution to screen it is realistic, where you want to fall, I guess, on the standards in terms of the interpretation of the decision and bringing in the economics of the thing, and then, okay, what's the aesthetics in terms of who's looking at it and how long are you looking at it, and is it going to make a mistake? And what is also apparent, I think, for the record, is the applicant has come forward and said, there is a problem, okay, we have a problem here. We can't meet your current specifications that were outlined in your approval. Is there a solution? Is there a middle point that we can try to work something out? And I think that's what that's what your application's about here this evening, correct? Right. So each of us will just need to decide that. But I think, having seen the other pictures that Attorney Pearson passed out with respect to the Burgess building and a few others, you can see the mechanicals in the pictures. I don't know, I'm not on ground level or driving by to see if they're relevant or how they fit in, but they're clearly there. To say that you're not going to see mechanicals in a building, I don't think that's a realistic point of view. So I think we need to realize that we ask a lot of our applicants. Sometimes it works out 100%. And they can do things. Sometimes it doesn't. I think that if we don't agree with what their alternative solution is, then we can just say, well, we're not going to accept your application, and it's going to cost you $76,000 to do this. So, and that's not our fault that it's costing $76,000. It's just part of the way it is. So, but I do think that you do have to consider if there are alternatives at this point, because it's already substantially built. And what objective are we going to get when, in reality, when you drive by it, most people aren't even looking at the top of the building. They're probably looking at the thing that says Delamar, saying, oh, that's the hotel, that's where I need to go. As a landmark, not, oh, there's that mechanical up on top that's got this big, huge painted box around it. Okay, I don't think that's the landmark. And I think it's important. I think having sat on Blueback hearings way back when and was part of the design, we were very careful in terms of how we designed everything in the entire square. And this is the last piece that's come into the square. So for me, yeah, I would like everything to be perfect. And tonight and I agree, you probably do. And tonight you've admitted that it's not possible. Well, it is possible, but at a very high cost. And I think that if we were in a position to determine what would be the standard, knowing the cost, I don't know if you would have agreed to the screening when we had the hearing on putting it up on the top, that it was going to cost $76,000 to $100,000. I don't know. I think your position might have been a little different. But that's what I have to say about the screening. Now, I want to also ask a question about the vestibule, because there was in the memo from the fire department, and I didn't see any further correspondence, that they had a problem with whether or not it was going to be a problem for access in and out of the building. Now, I just don't understand how that's been left. Can you just clarify that? Is it such that the structure's temporary in nature, right?
It's temporary, yes.
And it's only going to go up during winter months, right?
Months, yeah.
Now, it's going to, in the end, be code compliant, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The fire marshal, the building department wouldn't approve it otherwise, so, right.
Okay, so every time, so my understanding is it's going to come down in the springtime, be stored somewhere,
Yes,
and then put back out?
correct.
Will it be inspected every single time?
Whatever the process is, will be compliant.
Well, my anticipation would be that every time it gets put into place, it would need to be inspected to make certain that it hasn't gotten to a condition where it doesn't meet code. So,
We have no problem with that, whatever the standards are.
right, and you'd be
obviously.
willing to bear the cost of that yearly inspection to make certain that it's meets the code.
Yes, as long as we're not talking about these numbers.
No, I'm not. No, I can't imagine it costs $76,000 to inspect a vestibule. But I just want to get that on the record, because we're going to have to send somebody out if it's a temporary thing that comes out and comes back in, and it definitely affects public safety of the patrons using the restaurant and the rest of the space, to make certain that there's not a danger there, and because it's temporary and it's not permanent part of your building. So.
Makes absolutely sense to me.
I sort of see that similar to anything that the fire marshal looks at with respect to temporary uses, that they annually inspect things that would be, but you don't have a problem with
No.
We're seeking that and getting that approval. Okay. That's it, Madam Mayor. That's all I wanted to get on the record this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Anything else? All right, so we are going to read into the record a letter dated May 8th, 2018 from TPZ recommending partial approval, and letter dated May 22nd, 2018 from DRAC. Also, we just received recommending partial approval. And with that, Mr. O'Leary, is there anything else with that? Because for the TPZ, did you want to just review the fact?
Well, I think what you're probably referring to is the fact that they issued a partial approval, and as some or all of you may know, if the TP&Z recommends against adoption of a project, or an application such as this, you can only pass it by a 2/3 majority vote. I have reviewed the letter that was issued by TP&Z, and I've spoken with Mr. Dumais, who was at the meeting, and I've also had this same conversation with TP&Z on a number of occasions over the years about how they phrase their letters. And I think that this letter stops short, as it's written, of being a denial, and therefore would not trigger a supermajority vote, even on that third element.
Thank you. You had sent us an email on that, but I just wanted to make
Yes.
sure that everybody was up to speed. Okay. Thank you. And with that, I will close, if there's, oh, we right. Any speakers? I apologize.
So this is the council. No one signed up.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this public hearing? No? All right. With that, I will close the public hearing. We will start the council meeting in 5 minutes. Thank you. Second public hearing, we will do that first. Gee, is that okay? Can you wait?
Does he have to be here
He has to. All right. Go ahead, do your thing. Yeah. All right, we are going to open, sorry, we had a little technical problem. Leon's got to run for an emergency, but we're going to open the public hearing for this neighborhood assistance grant. A resolution authorizing submission of the neighborhood assistance grant application. Roll call, Ms. LeBron.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Absent. Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And Mr. Williams is absent.
Thank you, Ms. LeBron. Mr. Hart, presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. In order to submit an application under this program, the council needs to conduct a public hearing. The Neighborhood Assistance Act program, it's a state tax credit program. It's designed to attract investment in community organizations. This year, our solicitation, we received 16 projects from 13 local nonprofit agencies. So the council needs to conduct this public hearing in order to receive any feedback or input from the community.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And we already received the application, details on the applications.
Correct.
So we will check the sign-up sheet.
I just did, and it's blank.
Okay, so nobody has signed up. Is there anybody that would like to speak to the authorization submission of the neighborhood assistant grant application? Any questions from our council? All right, with that, I will close the public hearing. And we will start in 4 minutes. Thank you.
Right past it. And, you know, light outside, there were about a half a dozen cars part of their, and we pulled in to see if we could do the tasting and the tour, and they looked at us like, it's 8 o'clock. This is a private event, you know, what are you thinking? It's like, well, I'm thinking that it's 8 o'clock and it's still light out, and it's messing with my head, you know? So we never got back, but it was, we had a couple of those while we were up in Akron.
Yeah, it's good.
You know, they're Vikings, they're hardy.
Yeah, it didn't get dark till 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
They got another month to gain sunlight, which is crazy. It really messed with me. We were walking around at 10, 11. I got no sleep the past 4 days.
Yeah, it's. I had the same problem when we were there. Damn, I was. You know, I kept waking up and going, it must be late. I must have slept in because it was bright.
That happened to us. You know, I mean, I really enjoyed Norway though. You got to add it to your list.
Actually thinking. I'm trying to talk my way into going back to Iceland.
You could do the Apple because it's one of their stops and get free. Go to on the way to Norway. Depending on which airline fly, but Norwegian is.
We're thinking of going back, and I think we can do it to Ireland.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I'm trying to convince her to go back in the winter time. Yeah.
It's hardy.
It is, and we probably wouldn't get far out of Reykjavik, except maybe to the...
Yeah. I'm trying to convince my wife to take the kids there on like a short 4-day trip. There's so many families traveling to Norway with us, and it's so child-friendly there. It was amazing. Playgrounds everywhere, public transit was unbelievable. It was really cool. Yeah.
Well, that was my grandson Colin's first stamp in his passport. It was Iceland.
Nice. Can't beat that.
So after we had a wait list.
Early July. It's expensive. It's like $19 for a pound. Really?
Oh, well, they burn it.
Yeah, me too.
And we bought irritated.
You know, we got bread. You would have been in the beauty section because she is weight person of the year for last year. Connecticut. I don't know. I just know her Jewish. Oh yes, I weight person. Oh yeah, they have the services, food service industry event. They have a big event down in the casino.
We must have got the loser.
Well, I actually, I saw her. I think she was new. How many kids?
Joey thought that the only thing we got outside was ours and everyone else was inside. Yeah, that we were outside.
That's entirely possible. That's entirely possible, but that's no excuse. First of all, they have an entire second tier of people who bring them. So if and they bake it at the minute. So it's entirely possible that somebody screwed up on the pepper. But I find that hard to believe because we got bread, and you were seated after. Well, maybe they ran out. Maybe we got the last of the good bread.
Oh, are you kidding? No, we love it. The boys, because it has food that we love, and they love it.
Yep, exactly.
Calling the, what day is it? May 22nd. It's 4:30 for me. Public hearing to order, public hearing, town council meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start with a roll call, and then we will present a proclamation.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd. And we have Mr. Swanton sitting in for Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules to present a proclamation.
Second, I'm sorry.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And this, I'm not sure, this is Sarah Raskin is going to meet me at the podium, and I don't know if there's anybody else that would like to. Mary Beth, I'm not sure if you're here. Don't be shy. So just as a little precursor, Sarah had called me to request this proclamation. And again, as we start the council meeting, there's another community that is reeling from gun violence, and we think of them today. And we're calling for an action and change so we don't have to keep remembering and thinking and praying for communities that are torn apart by gun violence. I know where orange is Moms Against Gun Violence and an awareness of gun violence, right? Is that the?
Where orange is in honor of a young woman who was she was actually at President Obama's inauguration and then returned to her home in Chicago and was killed by gun violence a week after the inauguration. And her friends asked for everyone to wear orange because it's the color that hunters wear to be seen.
Okay, thank you. So the proclamation is to recognize and appeal to action on gun violence. Whereas every day 96 Americans are killed by gun violence, and more than twice as many are injured, totaling more than 500,000 people killed or injured since the tragic shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And whereas following the slaughter of 17 students and educators at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, tens of thousands of students across the U.S. have joined the call for common sense gun laws. And whereas 17,000 children and teens are victims of gun violence every year, and more than 100 are killed unintentionally. And whereas beyond the loss of life and the pain and suffering of survivors, there are countless thousands of family members and friends whose lives are forever scarred. And whereas to honor all victims of gun violence, June 2nd was designated as National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize June 2nd, 2018 as Gun Violence Awareness Day in the town of West Hartford, and remember the lives lost to gun violence and families and friends of those victims. 150,000 students have been either witnesses or victims of gun violence since Columbine. So, all right, thank you. And if you want to say a couple of words.
I just want to take a second to thank you so much, Mayor Cantor, and the members of the Town Council and the people of the town of West Hartford for recognizing this incredible public health crisis and for caring so much about the safety of our children, our residents in West Hartford, Greater Hartford, and the nation.
And I just want to recognize our Human Rights Commission, too, is also here to support this, recognizing this day. Thank you so much, and all right, take care. Okay, we will go to number 4, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move approval of the Town Council meetings of 5/8/2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Public forum, we will look for a sign-up sheet, but there's not much on the calendar that was the subject of a public hearing, so this is for the opportunity for the public to speak on something on the agenda that is not the subject of a public hearing. It's blank, and so if there's anybody that would like to speak. Okay, we will move on to consideration of consent calendar number 6, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we place items number items number 14 on the consent calendar. That's a difficult sentence.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move approval of an application on behalf of Delamar West Hartford LLC, seeking approval of an amendment to Special Development District Number 140, located at 1 Memorial Road and known as Delamar. The amendment requests changes to the approval, architecture, and landscaping to permit the elimination of an architectural rooftop mechanical screen, the elimination of decorative trees, and the addition of a seasonal vestibule enclosure for the Artisan restaurant.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. We did have, this was the subject of a public hearing not that long ago, and we went into detail. We actually, I think we need to suspend the rules to read in the record no, not for, okay. We don't think we do, okay. So, is there anybody that would like to talk about this? This is the summary is this is a approval of application of changes to the SDD to the Delamar Hotel for removal of some trees, for adding a vestibule, and for elimination of a screen that was approved as part of the SDD process when it was designed at the top of the hotel. The difficult thing that we have on this application is that DRAC approved a couple of those elements, but they didn't approve the screen. And so anytime that we have an issue that is before us that is not approved by TP&Z actually also, and DRAC, we take it seriously. So I would like to open up for discussion. Mr. Dodge?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a point or a question of procedure. The amendment that we would be approving, it says here to permit the elimination of the architectural rooftop mechanical screen. Would we also, I know that there was an intermediate option that was presented tonight to remove the ladders and some other vestiges. Would we be able to make that a requirement of the amendment? I guess that's to you, Pat.
Sure. You could, as it is proposed and before you, it has a screen on all 4 sides. You could approve it subject to the condition that the ladders and other, I think it was called clutter, on the east face be removed, and that louvers be installed and over the 2 fans.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Ms. Carey?
Are we voting now?
Yeah. We're actually going to be voting on this. It's a roll call vote, but I just wanted to know if anybody had any comments before we actually do the vote.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be supporting this. I was taken when Leon, Councilor Davidoff, made the comment about there's so much of this mechanical stuff on top of these buildings. I live on Arnoldale, and Packard was putting up some Verizon towers, and of course I live on the street, and I was like outraged, livid. Went down there only to find that there was a ton of antennas on top of the Packard that I had never noticed before. So I think most of the time we drive around town, we're kind of looking at eye level, and occasionally we'll look up. So I think $76,000 is burdensome to a new business in town that's trying to make it. I have the utmost respect for Todd and Drac's opinion, but I do understand that sometimes an applicant makes a commitment and then perhaps has to change it, and I don't find, and I do agree that the architect, when he says it's aesthetically pleasing without the screen, it does seem really large, so, I think that it's a good thing, and I will be approving it.
Thank you, Ms. Carey. Mr. Dodge?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I plan on voting in favor of this as well, subject to the condition that the Delamar take the steps that they outlined tonight in order to address some of the issues, some of the concerns. I'm in complete agreement with Attorney Pearson. In fact, in a way, I'm almost happy that this was $76,000 because I think if it was like $1,000, you guys might have just put up the screen. I'm in complete agreement that the screen, based on the images that we saw tonight, I think you said aesthetically deleterious. I think that doing this is far more preferable from an aesthetic standpoint, and so I plan on supporting the amendment subject to that condition.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. So we will vote, I guess, with the amendment as well. So we will make a motion, but continue the comments. Yeah.
Mr. Sweeney.
I would like to put my comments in line with Councilman Dodge. I'd be supporting this with the offer that the Delamar has made. I also just think in general, the town has to be flexible to new business that's coming into town. You know, we appreciate what all you guys are doing here, and we should try to be as flexible to business to allow for it to grow here in town. So I will be supporting it with the conditions provided by the Delamar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. So I don't have a problem with the trees and the vestibule, but with respect to this cooling tower, so the history is we had an application and we approved the cooling unit to be located on the ground, I understand on the Trout Brook side of the structure. We were asked to permit that cooling tower to be moved up to the roof, screened or partially hidden because of the size of the unit, and we approved that. The unit that went up on the roof is not the unit that we approved to be put on the roof. It's a lot larger than that unit, which is now requiring this larger screen. The sense that I get is this is a cost issue because I think Attorney Pearson, you said if it was $7,000, they would just go ahead and do it, but it's $74,000 and they don't want to do it. And I understand that. I'm sensitive to the cost of it. But what's come before this body is an application for a smaller unit screen that we wouldn't see, and now we're presented with the choice of painting it, removing some clutter, or putting a big box around it, which I agree doesn't look appealing. But at the end of the day, we have a letter from our Design Review Advisory Committee, a group that we look to and rely on for their input and approval on these types of projects. And their letter says, on the request for the elimination modification to architectural rooftop mechanical screen, the DRAC finds that the proposed solution, paint, removing of hardware, and addition of louvers on the fan openings, is not compatible with the building's architectural elements at this important location and the applicant's past commitments on this design element. As such, the committee does not support this portion of the application. And so, without knowing more, hearing more from them, or knowing whether there could be some compromise that could be reached between the applicant and DRAC, perhaps some middle ground between this expensive screening and the way it would look, I can't support the third part of the application. So I guess when we move it, we may have to bifurcate, how we vote on it, because as I mentioned, I don't have a problem with the vestibule or the trees, but I cannot support, as currently presented, the removal or elimination of the screening that was originally approved by the council.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will also be voting to approve, but I do want to say in response to Mr. Barnes's very good points about the process by which we got here. I do share the concern of developers, and I don't think that happened here, but sort of the fear of a bait and switch that we often have when we see theoretical presentations. And personally, I find it difficult to judge a project by the very pretty pictures we get, because they always look great, and the people walking by are very happy, and and the lighting is great, and so I do get reluctant when a change is asked for, and we wonder about whether or not it was real to begin with. But here, having seen what ended up, I mean, the current status of the building, I think looks fine. I actually walked over here tonight and read the DRAC letter on my phone as I walked up the street and said, oh, good, I'm walking, so now I can take a look for myself. And I have no problem with it as it is currently. I certainly support, if there's a willingness to take away the clutter and cover it up, I'm sure that'll make it a little better. But I having the advantage now of seeing this, which is not normally the case, I just can't object to the current look. making it a little bit cleaner will be better. But given those circumstances and knowing what we know now, I'll approve this, because I can't see making a developer jump through extra hoops for really, as far as I can tell, aesthetically no purpose. So, thank you, and again, thank you for your continued contribution to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree that the elimination of the decorative trees, that case was proven quite well. They're not necessary. The applicant said about the seasonal vestibule enclosure to Artisan restaurant, they would take all the necessary steps. So it really does come down to this architectural rooftop mechanical unit. And as was presented in the hearing this evening, the applicant said that what was designed for the building and what was finally installed in the building was larger in scale than what we had approved. And with that presents a different set of facts with respect to what's necessary to screen it. We do rely on the Town Planning and Zoning Commission as well as our Tract Design Review Advisory Commission to provide us with feedback and support for aiding us in making our decisions. And I think that this particular decision this evening has a financial component to the tune of about $76,000, as was put on the record. As whether or not that's relevant for a zoning decision or a special development district decision, I'll leave that to each of us to make their own. So if one just divorces themselves from the situation about the financial costs and one just does a look at the pictures that were presented with respect to the building and does an actual physical inspection, as I did, of the building from all four different angles, if I wasn't looking for the mechanical on top of that building, I would have no idea that something was not right. What I do notice when I go on the Troutbrook side, I see it says the Delamar, and that's the landmark. And the rest of the building, in terms of the facade and how it sits on that property, is in harmony with our district, our Blueback Square district. It fits in perfectly and has been received well by our community. I would be hard pressed for someone to try to convince me that a mechanical system on top of the building that would require a screen, I don't know, maybe 1.5 times what we had originally thought would be up there, is really necessary. And would we have said to them, yes, put this huge screen up on there when we had decided to say screen it in? So you balance all these things out, and I just come into the position that sometimes things are not able to be constructed the way that we had wished them to be, and I point back to the Quaker Green scenario. And that one, I'll refresh people's memory if you were here or weren't here, was the condominiums on South Quaker and New Britain Avenue at the old Talcott School. And they had to come in here after they'd installed a series of air conditioning compressors on the ground. And they were all supposed to be on the rooftop of those condominiums. No one was supposed to see them. So what did we do in the end? We voted to tell them to screen those the best they could. They could not, because of the mechanical system and the way that it needed to be done from an engineering standpoint, put them up on the roof. And obviously that would have been a better thing. So when you step back and you look at these two scenarios, one, we got it up on the roof, one, we have it out, what we called it, a compressor graveyard. I would argue that it's more unattractive to see a series of air conditioning compressors on the ground when you're walking the premises than to see something that is 4 or 5 stories in the air that I'm not looking at when I'm walking by the hotel, whether it be on Raymond Road or up Memorial or driving by on Trout Brook. I don't think that's the thing. So I think to put it in proper perspective, yes, it probably would be ideal if it was screened the way that we had intended it, but sometimes that can't happen. And I think we need to be reasonable with respect to what the expectations are. Could we just say to them, no, we're going to stick to what we had, you spend the $76,000, you figure it out. We could do that too. Am I willing to do that this evening? No, because I don't think that this scenario is any different than the Quaker Green scenario. I see the similarities to be just too great, because we didn't say to them, rip out all those air conditioning condensing units and you figure out how to redo your building and put them up on top of that building. And we're not going to tell them to take this thing down off the roof and put it near their event space at this point. So I understand where we are. I understand the deference we do give to DRAC, and I do appreciate our town planner and our community development director's role in this. But in light of the situation that currently exists, and in light of the economic situation that we have in Connecticut, I don't find it to be a business-friendly solution that we would ask them at this point to incur this enormous expense at this point. Does it make me happy? No, but I think we have to really think about this and say, why do people make decisions to go to different communities? And I think it's fair to say that West Hartford, I think, would come out looking pretty good in saying that from those looking to invest in West Hartford, we do have high standards. I don't think we're compromising our standards. But when something doesn't go as planned or can't happen or is economically not as feasible as it should be, the town is willing to work with the business entity to make that happen. And that's where I'm coming this evening. I think we work really hard to encourage businesses to develop here. This is the first hotel that we've ever had in the town of West Hartford of this caliber. It is a draw to many in the state as well as in the nation. There's many people who do business in our greater Hartford area who put their guests up here at the Delamar. And there's a lot of competition in this industry, but I think in the long run, if this was to have a negative impact on this particular business, and it could, just to write a check for $76,000 out of your operating expenses at this point, would, in my opinion, be a little detrimental. And what are we talking about? We're talking about a very large screen, as Attorney Pearson pointed out, that needs to be mounted, and I don't know if it looks any better. I really don't, than what they could do in the alternative. But I leave that to everyone's discretion. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. But for me, I think there's a lot of factors that tell me we've had similar scenarios. There is an economic impact here. I understand the DRAC proposal, but when you just put it all together, I think a reasonable, prudent solution here is let's work on something that is aesthetically pleasing, and then really step back from it and say, who's looking? Really, who's looking here? Because I don't know who's looking, because most people don't walk around West Hartford with their head looking up at what's on the rooftops. Most people are looking around to see what's at face level here. And what is really nice when you drive by on Trout Brook is that sign that says Delamar. And when you tell people, yeah, Blueback Square is located near Delamar Hotel. If you see that Delamar, you're in the right place. It's not, oh, you saw that mechanical thing up there that's not screened. I don't think anyone's saying that. So I appreciate your candidness this evening to admit that it's not what we had said it was going to be. I think you appreciate the fact that there may not be enough votes to go with the alternative solution at this point. I have no idea. But you presented the best case you can. And for me, I appreciate that. And for those reasons, I'm going to vote in favor of this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Anybody else? Ms. Fay?
Thank you very much. That's an interesting viewpoint. I don't disagree with a lot of the things that you said. I love the Delamar, for the record. I think it's a fantastic addition to town. I've been to events there. I've eaten dinner there. I've been out to the fireplace when s'mores are offered with some kids, and it's just terrific. But maybe I'm an outlier, but I do see those that big unit on the top of the building. And I did even before I was on the town council. And I drove by it and I said, geez, it's a beautiful building, aesthetically pleasing, terrific. But I always saw them. So maybe I look at things differently, look at the world differently. But it did stick out like a sore thumb to me for such a beautiful building. I didn't personally, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I did not find the screening that you guys had proposed, even though it was bigger than the original design, to be unattractive. In fact, I thought it looked better with the screens than it did with the clutter taken away in the painting. But that, like I said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think context is required when you talk about the addition of expense. I don't like that. I'm very pro-business, just so you know. That's been my career. I've been in business for, since I got out of college. I hate to impose additional costs on any business, but I think if you use perspective, I don't even want to guess how expensive that building was. So $76,000 is a rounding error. So I think there's a compromise that we could come to. Maybe now is not the time because it is a new facility and, you're not up to where you want to be in terms of occupancy, but maybe it's something that we could agree to be added later when, the hotel is in the black and you're doing quite well. I found it, so I guess what I'm saying is I can go along with the trees and it's not because I'm being a stickler to the rules. It's just how I see it. I would agree with Drac and with Todd and his team that it is more aesthetically pleasing with the additions of the screens that were originally part of the proposal. So, but I think there's further dialogue that we could have to come to some sort of position where you could do it when it was more feasible from a financial standpoint.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. No? Okay, I guess I'm the only one left. So obviously this is it's always difficult when TPZ and DRAC are not agreeing on something that an applicant wants. The Delamar Hotel has taken an incredible, has made an incredible financial commitment to the town of West Hartford, has taken a great deal of care and commitment to detail, the consideration of design and commitment that both, and again, working with DRAC and TPZ, they came out with a really wonderful product. I had very dear friends actually from Seattle. He was the CFO of Nordstrom, grew up in Seattle, and his mom passed away, and they came into town and stayed at the Delamar. It was very, they basically rented a floor because that's where everybody was coming in from all over the country and the world. And the comments were so positive. In West Hartford, this is an incredible product. They were bent over backwards to accommodate a family in a difficult state of their lives. And I'm so appreciative that that asset and that resource was there for them and for obviously so many other people that come to town for a life cycle of events, whether it be weddings, bar mitzvahs, or funerals, or simply family get-togethers or business gatherings. This was not possible before. But I know it's been challenging, and I know that September open date was a delay from the original, and it made it difficult. Also, banquets, people don't want to open up or book an event if they don't see the hotel fully up, and there's about a year delay on that. So we have to be juggle in our face our reality. The grounded units that were original part of the plan and the change to bring them up high, I think was a very smart decision. It it's not, no air conditioning units are beautiful and ideal, but it's the sound actually that can really deteriorate the quality. And I remember when we were talking about Quaker Green, there was a lot of concerns about the sound of the units, in addition to having them right off of a banquet area would really have been a drawback, and I think a mistake. So I appreciated it going up there, and obviously the bigger units that were ultimately ended up being required for that space. I'm not an engineer. I don't know why that's the case, but that is the case. And so that bigger unit, and then with screening on top of that, would have added an extra volume. I actually think we're seeing the worst case scenario sometimes when an applicant comes to us and it's against a DRAC or TP's decision. We don't know what that worst case is. We know what it is because it's up there, and we can actually hopefully make an amendment to make it a little bit better. So I do support the amendments as they've been submitted, with the condition that we, as the architect said, a solution would be to make it a simple and efficient, less voluminous and non-essential equipment, take away all that non-essential equipment or clutter, as we have referred to it. So I would condition on that. I want to thank Mr. Zambrano, an attorney person, for the presentation. We don't take this lightly. This is not a practice that we like to get into, to change a design in an SDD. But I think this is practical. This is what is before us. It's a business decision. To be honest, I would rather have that $76,000 put in the business to secure the business going forward, or to make some other improvements that benefit customers every day. As far as the vestibule goes, I appreciate it very much. I have been at the recipient end of that cold door that has opened, and I think that's a smart move. We see that all over in cities that you go to, whether it be Boston or New York, to have that comfort on the street when a restaurant is so close to the streetscape. So I appreciate that, and obviously the trees are not a drawback. But overall, not thrilled to be voting this way. Really does bother us to go against our very valued expertise of DRAC and TPZ, and feel that their opinions have had an incredible positive impact on this project all the way through. But in this case, I am going to vote to support the applicant's proposed amendment. So I think we're going to have to do it in phases. So we're going to vote, I think, together, the vestibule and the trees. Or how do you recommend?
I would suggest that you do this. First of all, move to amend to impose the condition, and then move to split the question. And I think it would be Councilor Barnes who'd probably make that motion to split the question, to deal with the first two amendments, the vestibule and the trees first, and then the mechanical cooling tower second, as amended by the condition. So you'd have the condition in place, whatever happened. I took the liberty of trying to draft a condition, so what I've written is: the application is approved subject to the condition that the ladders and other, quote, visual clutter, unquote, on the east side of the cooling tower shall be removed. Louvers shall be installed to screen the two fans on the east side of the cooling tower, and the cooling tower shall be painted to match the roof color.
Okay, so can we just move as the amendment as you have stated?
Yes.
I'm making a motion that we move the amendment as Mr. Allaire has stated. Second. Motion's been made and seconded, so we're going to vote on that motion to add that amendment to the, right? And we do have a roll call for that.
No, for conditions, you don't need a roll call. It's the final vote.
Right. All right, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And so now we will make a motion to vote for all of the amendments, and you can make an amendment to separate them, right? So I will make a motion that we adopt the application as amended. Second. A motion's been made and seconded.
And I make a motion to bifurcate the three requests into two parts. The first being the removal of the trees and the adding of the vestibule. And the second, with respect to the elimination of the screen structure as amended. So I make a motion.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Oh, so you said no to that? Okay, no to separate them? Okay. So it's a 8-1 on that, or doesn't, but it passes. So we will vote on the first two amendments. So all those in favor of the amendments as...
Roll call.
Oh, yes, we will have to do a roll call vote. For all of those in favor of the first two, that would be the elimination of the decorative screens, or it doesn't mean first two, the elimination of decorative skis and the addition of the seasonal vestibule enclosure for the Artisan restaurant. Roll call, Ms. LeBrow?
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Ms. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge.
Yes.
Ms. Fay,
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yep.
Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Winograd,
Yes.
and Mr. Swan.
Yes.
And then I will make a motion to adopt the amendment as amended for the changes to the approved architecture and land, to the rooftop mechanicals, architectural rooftop mechanicals, elimination of an architectural rooftop mechanical screen as amended. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. We'll roll call?
Mr. Barnes,
No.
Ms. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dodge,
Yes.
Ms. Fay,
No.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Winograd,
Yes.
and Mr. Swan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank Mr. Swanton for sitting in for Mr. Williams on this application. Appreciate your help very much. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Number 8, Ms. Kerrigan?
I'm so sorry. I want to say goodbye. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution authorizing submission of the Neighborhood Assistance Grant application.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. This was also subject of a public hearing by required public hearing. And if there's any comments on this before we actually vote. All right, all those, and this can just be a regular vote, not roll call. It's a resolution. So all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. No new business. Number 10, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. I've distributed copies of my report to the council. The last page, upcoming events and announcements are for you, Mayor. First, under the item of council business, we'll have a couple of items on the night of June 12th, a public hearing as well as a regular council meeting. Moving on to departmental reports. Very pleased to announce and remind the council that Chief Vernon Riddick Jr. will be sworn in as West Hartford's next Chief of Police. Will hold an oath of office ceremony at 12 p.m. noon on Tuesday the 29th here in this room. And we'll have a reception, the ceremony will be held in the Town Hall Auditorium, and the reception following will be held here in this room. So council members are certainly welcome to attend. I hope as many of you as possible will be there. Moving on, council will recall a couple meetings ago, I talked about the fact that the governor had endorsed our application that the New Park Avenue corridor be designated as an opportunity zone. There were 72 that the governor had nominated, and the U.S. Department of Treasury has approved all 72. What's an opportunity zone? Again, it's designed to encourage long-term investment in low to moderate income areas. It provides a federal tax incentive for investors seeking to reinvest unrealized capital gains into opportunity zones through opportunity funds. So we're hopeful that this will lead to further investment in our New Park Avenue corridor, and I would like to thank our staff, Mr. McGovern and Ms. Gorski, for their work in putting the application together. Moving on, I've received several questions from council members, other members of the community, about the status of the mowing of the former UConn campus. Staff had been tracking the issue as well. I did hear today that the university is planning to use a state-approved contractor to mow the areas outside the fencing, which is most of the campus. They'll do an initial mow this coming Thursday, May 24th, and they plan to continue to mow it every 2 weeks for the duration of the season. Moving on to some additional items. There's a section of Boulevard that we've been milling and paving. That began on May 14th. It will be completed tomorrow, May 23rd. This is the section from Trout Brook through Quaker Lane South. A couple of items here related to the Memorial Day holiday. The collection of trash, recyclable items, and bulky waste will be moved back a day that week due to the holiday. So Monday's collection will be completed on Tuesday, and each remaining day of the week, 1 day later than normal. June is dog license month for town clerk's offices across the state of Connecticut. Certainly no different here in West Hartford, so our town clerk's office will be mailing letters to over 3,000 dog owners in town, encouraging them to renew their license. The letter that we're going to send will also encourage people to sign up for our community advisory notification system, so that in the future we'll be able to send them an electronic message without having to send a hard copy mailing. Next item I'd like to touch on, or last item I'd like to touch on, the Department of Public Works will be conducting its final round of spring yard waste collection during the week of June 4th through June 8th. Items should be placed in a 30-gallon paper biodegradable bag. They're available at stores around the community and be put out at the curb the same day as the trash collection. So this will complete our spring yard waste collection round. The next round will commence in the fall of this year. That completes my report, Mayor. Happy to take any questions council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions for Mr. Town Manager? Mrs. Carrion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With respect to the Yukon property, what about the inside of the fence? Is there much mowing there that needs to happen?
I'll verify. I don't believe that those areas can be mowed. Just concern about disturbing areas where remediation has occurred or could occur.
Thank you, Ms. Karen. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Manager, can you update us as to the status of our injured police officer?
Yes, what Councilor Davidoff is referring to is one of our police officers was in pursuit a week or so ago of a shoplifting suspect. During the course of the arrest, she received some minor injuries. She's recovered nicely, and she was successful in making that arrest. She did a fabulous job. So she's doing very well, and will be back on the job soon.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Thank you, Mr. Davidoff, for asking. Actually, before I go into announcements, is there anything else? Before I go into announcements, we make a motion to suspend the rules. We should have done this under new business. Ordinance concerning the regulation of non-storm water discharges to the town's storm drainage system, and set the public hearing on June 12, 2018 at 7:15 in the Legislative Chamber. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. So back to announcements. Flags. Yeah. Okay. No, I appreciate your nudginess.
First, you need to suspend the rules, which
Absolutely right.
actually vote
Right.
on
Right. So,
the matter from here.
okay. So we actually made a motion and second to suspend the rules. Now we're making a motion and a second to set the public hearing for June 12, 2018. It's at 7:15 in the Legislative Chambers. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, now on to announcements. Flags on veterans' graves. Help is needed to place American flags on the 1,200 military graves at Fairview Cemetery located on Pleasant Street on Saturday, May 26th at 8:30 a.m. in advance of Memorial Day. If you can help, simply come to the cemetery. Fairview Cemetery, many hands make light work. This is a great educational opportunity for Boy and Girl Scouts. For more information, contact Renee McHugh at 860-561-7521 or Renee at westhartfordct.gov. Memorial Day Parade. The Memorial Day Parade will be held on Monday, May 28th at 10 a.m. This year's Grand Marshals are a father and daughter duo. Dawn Morris is a graduate of U.S. Military Academy at West Point and served as a captain in the Army's 130th Supply and Service Battalion at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Her father, Charles Carlton, is a retired U.S. Army infantry colonel who served 2 combat tours in Vietnam and Cambodia, as well as other sensitive Cold War assignments during a 28-year career from 1962 to 1990. All veterans, with a group or alone, are invited to march in the parade. A van will be available at St. Peter Claver Church to take any veteran who might not be able to walk the parade route. The van will be part of the procession. The service is free. Simply go to the church between 9 and 9:30 a.m. All participating groups should report to their lineup location at 9:30 a.m. Parade information is posted on the town's website, www.westhartfordct.gov/Memorial Day Parade. Immediately following the parade, a ceremony will be held at Veterans Memorial. In the event of rain, the ceremony will be held in the Town Hall Auditorium at 11 a.m. And Dawn happens to be a good friend of mine and a very inspirational. Her and her dad are quite a team. So very excited about that. WHC-TV 5K Walk the Walk, So We Can Talk the Talk, is hosting its first ever 5K on Saturday, June 2nd. Enjoy this family-friendly walk run that will have interactive activities along the way. Walkers and runners of all ages and skill levels are invited to join us from 9 to 11 a.m. at Town Hall. Afterwards, join us at Blueback Square for a celebration party. Tickets are $20 each per participant over 13 years old, and kids and dogs are free. Below, I guess, 13 years old. Visit www.whctv.org for more information. Celebrate West Hartford. The 32nd annual Celebrate West Hartford will take place on the grounds of Town Hall on Saturday, June 9th from 10 to 6 and June 10th from noon to 6, attracting over 35,000 people each year from the greater Hartford area. Celebrate West Hartford also provides festival attendees with a wide range of family activities, a highly rated juried arts and crafts show, great food, entertainment, games, carnival rides, and a certified 5K road race. There is no admission charge for the event, and many of the activities are free. Celebrity breakfast, bring your appetite, and $15 to Effie's Place Restaurant, 91 Park Road, on Tuesday, June 12th from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., and you will receive your choice of breakfast served by local celebrities. The money raised will help the Park Road Business Association pay various expenses for the 20th Annual Park Road Parade to be held on Saturday, October 6th, 2018. We also have we're very proud to announce that both high schools were named as gold medalists in U.S. News and World Report in the top 500 of tens of thousands of schools. I forget how many what the count is, but it's remarkable, and to have them one number away from each other is great. And they also finished 11 and 12 in the state of Connecticut, with far lower per pupil costs than many of our peers and a way more diverse school population. So we have every reason to be incredibly proud of what the product that they produce. Is there anybody else with announcements? No? Okay. With that, we will move to reports of Corporation Counsel. Mr. Allaire.
I have no formal report. I regret we do need an executive session for the purposes of discussing strategy and negotiations with respect to pending litigation, specifically a matter entitled Petition of the Communications Workers of America, CTIA, Frontier Communications of Connecticut, and the New England Cable and Telecommunications Association for a declaratory ruling regarding permissible use of the municipal gain by Connecticut municipalities. That's actually the name. I may be asking you to adopt a resolution with respect to that after the executive session. I also have brought Tom Gerard here to give you a brief update regarding a couple of other matters, but I won't be asking for any resolutions regarding those.
Thank you, Mr. Allaire. We have no, so from there we will go no appointments. A consent calendar. Is number 15, Ms. Carey?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 16, Ms. Carey?
Move we receive a resignation from Alyssa Norwood on 5/14/2018 from the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries, and we thank Alyssa for her service. I make a motion to suspend the rules for another communication. to accept? Yep, motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Communication, this is a communication from the town clerk regarding budget referendum petitions. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We have no petitions. Number 18, we don't have to make a motion for executive session. It says suspend the rules, but we don't have to. So moved, right. All those in favor of going into executive session? Aye. All those opposed? Whether you're in favor or not, we're going. All those opposed? Motion carries. Let's go. That wasn't the way I wanted to word it. I know. I got it, but. One of them had to drive all the way back to stores, so. Rising seniors at UConn. Father works for Cigna.
Are you doing an article on the STD? Can I give you a quote?
Did you or can? Oh, sure. It's gonna have to say.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's just a response to the news report.
See you later.
Thanks for running. All right. Sorry, I just couldn't kind of let it
Yeah,
go
no.
unchallenged. Thanks, Ronnie.
Thanks, Dallas. Have